Okay, so I wanted to show you essentially how to approach this question, because on the weekly past paper, a lot of you struggled with this one, either leaving it blank or having a go, but not quite sure. And I think it probably is an area we need a little bit of a revisit on. So prior to this question, we had the one that told us Lotta's grandmother suffered a stroke to the left hemisphere. So immediately I'm thinking, right, left hemisphere, if the damage is in the left hemisphere, and there would be damage as a result of stroke, then that's going to have an effect on the right side, because remember, the brain is contralateral. So I'm thinking about that. And then it tells me specifically that the damage is to the Broca's area, right? So I'm thinking, okay, she's got Broca's aphasia. That means her speech is going to be probably very broken, maybe even incoherent, not going to be able to say certain words. And also the motor cortex. So that tells me she's going to have problems with an element of her movement. That could be gross motor skills, so it could be as severe as paralysis, but remember that would be on the right side because the damage is in the left hemisphere. Or it could be fine motor skills, so she might be struggling to pick up a pen, knife and fork, that kind of thing. And that's quite common in somebody who's had a stroke. So those were the sorts of ideas that we wanted to talk about in part A. But part B is this idea of functional recovery and how the brain has a plasticity about it. It reshapes, it can almost repair itself after trauma. And the case of Gabby Giffords that we looked at in lesson was a good example of that. But there's been lots of research that tells us that the brain has a plasticity, a movement about it. And when one region gets damaged, another region can essentially fulfill the functions that the damaged region used to, so steps up, and there's a process that allows that to happen. So when we look at this question, using your knowledge of plasticity and functional recovery of the brain after trauma, explain why Lotta might be wrong, because she's worried that because her grandmother's old, she won't be able to make any recovery. So if I were approaching this question and it's only 4 marks, I'm going to start off by showing my knowledge of plasticity. So we know that the human brain has a plasticity about it. In this sense, it can change and remold. After the trauma of a stroke, because we're making it relevant to the question and Lotta's grandmother had had a stroke, it is possible for regions of the brain which have been damaged to repair themselves, or for new connections to form, and other areas of the brain to take on the lost functioning. Axonal resprouting. This is in your topic companion, and it's also on the Masalit videos. Axonal resprouting is where the axon of neurons, nerve cells, form new connections with others to connect damaged areas of the brain to non-damaged areas of the brain. Allows this to happen. And although we know the possibility of functional regeneration, so where it's the functions being regenerated and the brain's repairing itself, reduces with age, it is not impossible. And Lotta's grandmother's brain will still have sufficient plasticity to allow that to happen. And then we want to mention the fact that, especially as the stroke has caused indirect damage, and there is a greater chance of recovery from this. Now, for 4 marks, that would be all I would put. But if we just